volunteer. I will be competing in the Miss Oregon Volunteer Pageant in January of 2025. I've been involved in community activism since I was 12 years old. And so to be here and be a part of the work that Word is Bond has been doing is really amazing.
Hello there, I'm Dr. Shaina Pomerantz. I am the Executive Director of Race Talks, Uniting to Break the Chains of Racism. I'm a third generation Black Portlander, so my family's house is on Williams and Going, across the street from our family grocery store and barbershop. And yeah, my first protest march was 9 years old. It was an anti-apartheid march here in Portland, so that should give you an idea of how old I am.
My name is Twixx Williams, director, founder of Pink Beanie Productions. I also grew up in this church, not church, but what is it now? Alberta Abbey. But it used to be a church that I used to go to, but to see it be turned into something else that the community comes together to just celebrate is just amazing. So yeah, that's that all.
And last but not least, I am Thornton. My mantra is, I will be great, I will be an asset, I will give 110% of my effort at all times, and I will be a United States Marine Corps Naval Aviator. And honestly, we're gonna start off with just, what is Black Portland? What does the future of it look like to you?
The future of Black Portland. To me, this looks like more opportunities, not only for the youth, but for all Black people of Portland, but especially focusing on the youth, because I feel like we're in an awkward position of like, there's like two ways you can go in Portland. You can go down a good path, or you can go down a bad path. And I feel like the people on this panel right now are a part of helping those youth make that decision. And so I'm excited to see how the people, me and the people on the panel, are able to help with making that decision of going on the right path.
Could you repeat the question?
What does like the future of Black Portland look like to you?
So I'll use myself as an example and a testimony. With Arianna having a nonprofit organization and choosing to take a 21-year-old across the country to film a documentary. I mean, just taking risk with our youth here in Portland. If you have a business and you have a design that you need, it may not be the person that's been doing it for 50 years, it's your neighbor that's across the street that been drawn for 1 to 2 years. So just taking that risk for the people, the younger generation, because you never know who's the next whoever, you know? So just, I'll use myself as a testimony to not look at, I guess, the age and experience, but just more so the risk and the potential, you know? So, yeah.
I'll answer the question. I'm just curious for the folks in the audience, how many of you were here in 1990 or before, by a show of hands? So thank you. So that is very specific, because my Black Portland looked very different as a child. This was an all Black community. To me, I actually thought Portland was all Black. And so, you know, I was born and raised in California. So when I go down Williams Avenue now, when I go through the Albina community now, it looks very different. And so I'm so happy to hear the positive affirmations that you feel about the future of our Black Portland, and I think you give me hope for it. But knowing what Black Portland had been and the intergenerational activity that we experienced, so just for, because the majority of hands did not go up, Black Portland used to be, you go down Williams Avenue, you honked and waved at every single person, and sometimes people stopped, got out of their car, hugged, and you had like a little block party that popped up. And so that was me as a kid. I couldn't go down really anywhere without somebody saying, oh, there's a little Donna, or where are you going? You too far from your house. Do your grandparents know where you are? You understand what I'm saying? And so knowing Demetria's story and the experience of what she went through and why she's leaving Ghana and what I see happening with white supremacy here, I'm very concerned about the future of our Black Portland. So I see that while we have very intentional plans for keeping Portland Black, there are counter forces at play that are fighting against that. And so I think as long as we stay engaged and intentional, we will see a Black Portland in the future.
Honestly, to build off of that, like when you said that people came out and hugged and greeted each other, being from the South originally, being from North Carolina, I would see that all the time. And that is something that as soon as I got here about 6 years ago now, then again, I lived in North Carolina 11 years of my life. And getting here, when I first said hi to somebody and I didn't hear a response, it was like, wow, maybe they didn't hear me or anything like that. Going up to the next person, hey, how you doing? Walk right past me. I mean, we lived in an apartment complex for about 4 years. Getting in the elevator, my mom would always be the one talking, and it kind of grew on me to just be quiet and just keep to myself. But I have been really working on just trying to get back in that old groove of saying hi to somebody. I mean, just checking in on somebody, seeing how their day's going, because it really goes a long way. All right.
Real quick, yeah. So I think what everybody's speaking to here, in some sense or another, is the fragmentation of community. Yeah. This is a community that I also grew up in, and I remember it very much the way that you remember it. One of the most jarring parts of my childhood was growing up in a very transitional phase of the neighborhood. I remember my early childhood, which was spent in this building, which was spent on these blocks surrounding this area, being hyper communal. And then the older I got, as I got to your age, I got into high school, I remember seeing more and more things that felt out of place. Maybe you see a white lady jogging down the street with an iPhone attached to her arm. You're like, what the hell is this woman doing? She must be crazy. But I think when I left for college, I came back home. The thing that most jarred me was how different the space felt, right? Swapping people out is not a one-to-one exchange, because what you lose is that neural fabric that connects people to one another. I can't tell you, I mean, how many folks here could say they can name the names of every neighbor on their block? Is there anybody who knows everybody who lives on their block right now? So I think like what we've lost is our connection to one another. And when we talk about the future of this place, that conversation necessarily has to be rooted in rebuilding the infrastructure of community, right? That's why I feel so lucky to be doing the work that I get to do on a day-to-day basis with the Albina Vision Trust. Our entire purpose is around not just building community, but making sure that we own the things that we build, so that when we build those things and when they naturally attract folks and when they appreciate and value, we can make sure that our roots remain intact rather than getting dug up and shipped out as far east as the city could push us. So I'm hopeful, because we're at a moment in time here in this city where we've acquired enough capital, not just financial, but political and communal, to where we can really and truly start to band together and start to dig our toes back into the soil beneath our feet. Yeah.
All right, wrapping that question up, thank you very much. What do you feel, actually, what advice do you have for young African Americans, men and women, trying to find themselves and trying to find their destiny in Portland?
I can start with this one. So my current platform in pageantry is GROW, which stands for Guiding Resilience Our Way. And my main purpose, my main vision with that. I plan on turning that into an actual organization this year, but my main goal for that is to encourage children to go after anything that they're passionate about, regardless of how much they think that someone might not engage with it, no matter how popular they think it is. Like, always go for something that you're passionate about, because you never know how passionate someone else might be in that, how you might inspire them. And I forgot to answer this earlier, but my mantra, I actually discovered this today, is actually, it is important for you to be a part of the change that you want to see. Because I see how I've been a part of the change that I want to see in my small community, and it's inspired me to encourage other children to do that, and I'm only 20. So I'm really hopeful to see how my skills and my knowledge can be passed down to create more community activists and create more people able to tell stories like mine, so where they're passing the torch of activism down, or like their wisdom down. So, yeah.
Yeah, one thing I would say to the youth, if you don't see the category, that's because you're supposed to create it. You know, sometimes if you don't see the category for something you want to do, that's because you're supposed to create it. I grew up in high school, and it was like, you either gonna be a basketball player, football player, or you're gonna be a rapper. You know what I'm saying? And I didn't do none of those things. And so when I was just like, okay, let me do film, I'm like, wait a minute, where everybody at? You know what I'm saying? So just like, literally, yeah, you have to be the one to create that field. I mean, it's like growing up, you know, it's so common, and it's such the right thing to do everything that everybody else is doing, because that's comfortable, you know? And so when I took this lane of doing film, I mean, being comfortable, you know? And so I just think that's the biggest thing to the youth, and I encourage is, if you're uncomfortable, you're doing something right. Because if you feel comfortable, you're not doing what, you know, like, not to discard what you're doing, but going against the friction is the way to go, you know? Because it's whatever you're doing that's comfortable, you know, is yeah, I'll just keep it at that. Just go for it.
I want to add to that also. I go to PCC, and I'm studying to become an American Sign Language interpreter. And I cried my first week of classes because we didn't have interpreters. And I thought, what am I doing here? How am I going to learn a language and I don't understand anything? And now I'm in ASL. I'm almost in my 200 level classes, and I'm able to perform a whole song. So, like, just believe in yourself and be passionate. Just keep encouraging yourself to keep going, no matter what the challenge is, seriously.
I think as far as in my former youth days here in Portland, I think what kept me engaged was taking part of everything because my mother told me I had to. And I think we have so many kids that don't know that they have so many amazing programs here for a number of different reasons. And so I think the role of helping youth to be engaged is that you need an adult to help direct them to the thing. And so that could be a parent, or Demetria and I were having a conversation. She's been cooking up in my kitchen the last couple of days, and it's been great hanging out. And we've been talking about motherhood and being children and, you know, the failures of our mothers and all the things. And the reality is we got mamas at work. We got mamas that got things to handle. And so if you are an auntie in community, if you are an uncle, if you are a teacher, if you are, you know, that person in community seeing a young person, check in. Hey, what are you doing? I see you hanging out. Do you have after school plans? Do you have weekend plans? Listen, I know about Word is Bond. I know about La Femmes. I know about Urban League Youth. I know about, you know, NAACP, whatever the program is. Let me introduce you to Twixx, who's out here making films. You want to learn? We have a role and responsibility as the adults in the community to help channel the young people into activities. And so especially those of us who are working in organizations, I create stuff for young people. As a former high school teacher, there is nothing that I do that I can't bring a young person in and let them shadow me on. So if you have a job that allows you to bring a young person in, bring them in, because that is on the job skill training. And so by them having that exposure, that professionalism, a lot of us want to critique young people and say, oh, they don't know how to talk and they don't know how to act. They haven't had the exposure. So that's where we come in as the adults to say, let's create that opportunity.
Can I jump in here? Sorry, this mic. Oh, you okay? I think you can. It should be okay. Yeah, I appreciate you. On this point of exposure, so 2 points I think here. When I'm thinking about talking to young folks in particular, the point of exposure is so important. We are direct byproducts of the spaces that we have the privilege of passing through on a day-to-day basis. Understanding that, I think, is central to a fundamental lesson that I had to internalize as a kid. Man, if you are a young person and you have the opportunity to get out of this place, not permanently, right? But get out of this place so that you can see the rest of the world, you can see what else is out there. The reason I say that is because I think that oftentimes people born and raised here, especially black folks born and raised here, at least the ones in my experience who have stayed here, more often than not, they talk about staying here as something they were forced to do by circumstance rather than something they chose to do out of agency. I think that this space that we live in, this city that we live in was intentionally constructed, the state that we live in was intentionally constructed to constrain us, right? So I think it's important, like the work that Lakiana and Word is Bond is doing, the work that you had the opportunity to go do, Rock, in Ghana, like to get out of here and see where you're rooted, to see an environment where you're treated entirely differently than the way you're treated in this city, to be able to carry that self-respect, that dignity, that agency back into the space that you've always called home, and to be able to call it home by choice rather than by force is an incredibly liberating thing. So I say, get out of here, come back by choice. That's the first piece. The second piece is to your point, Twixx. I think you're always gonna be the fullest version of yourself as a young person or otherwise if you can step into things. Let me see, how could I phrase this? Don't choose between things. Figure out how to make things work together. I think we are fuller versions of ourselves when we stoke every nook and cranny, every aspect of our individuality, right? For me, what that might look like on a day-to-day basis, I can do work where I'm sitting down with the governor of the state, where I'm going and talking to state legislators, but I could be dressed the way I'm dressed, right? I could have tattoos on my neck. I could talk the way I talk. I can rap in my spare time, make music, and I can also be taken seriously in that space. So I think being very, very intentional about carrying your full personhood into the spaces that we had the opportunity to pass through is really essential to making sure that we're able to reframe these spaces and kick the walls down so that we can actually exist here freely rather than having to sever parts of ourselves in order to be accepted in spaces that weren't built for us to begin with.
Actually, I do have a question for you, Twixx. When you said going against the wedge, young African Americans who like see their only option as being basketball, who are trying to find other ways out of that and just going with the stereotypes that they are given, what advice do you have for those people that are going to face that adversity of going outside of those stereotypes and facing individuals who might say that they can't do it? Like for me, when I got to Portland, when I said I want to be a Marine, how many people down here say, oh, I want to be a United States Marine? Like, that's just not something I hear a lot down here. So what advice do you have for those people that want to go like all the different routes and see the different options?
Yeah, I would say if it's a career thing, my thing is when I decided what I wanted to do, it was my passion. It wasn't about the money. I think a lot of people in youth these days like base the job, like what can I do to get the most money? And then they're waking up every day doing, dang, I gotta go to work. And it's like they're going to work and it's not even about the job, it's about the money. So when I chose like my passion, the money comes, you know? So it's like when you go and chase what you want, the money will come, but not to make it about money. I think just surrounding yourself by others that have the same interest, you know? When I wanted to get into film, to use myself as another example, I didn't see much people that look like me into the film world. So I put myself in a position to be around people that are wanting to go and chase the same thing, you know? So it's like being uncomfortable and just finding other people that are like you, because there's not a category where you are if there's something that you want to get into, but there is a category overall if you look up and realize that, you know, there's other people that want to do the same thing you want to do. You just got to like get out the bubble of, you can't do that, you're not going to be this, and just go to, oh, you want to do film too? Let's make something happen. So I just put yourself in a space where there's, you know, other interest, you know, because there's all types of people that want to do the same thing. You just got to find them, you know?
All right, moving on to my next question. What do you feel like the community could do to make Black women feel more empowered and wanted?
You can acknowledge our existence, for one. I think the hardest thing, so I'll be 48. Ooh, I aged myself by 10 years. Oh, Lord, Jesus. Slow down. Whew, some days I do feel it. I remember when I was 23, you talk about you're 22 and you're a filmmaker. I have lived lives. I think there are people in this room who have lived lives. So when I was 23, I dropped out of school, I rock bottomed, and by school I mean college. I was attending Hampton University, which is an HBCU, and I wear that dropping out as a badge of honor, because I think a lot of times when we talk about going to college, we think it's easy, you know. My parents were going through a divorce, my mom and my stepdad. I worked 5 jobs. First time leaving home, going 3,000 miles, I got pregnant. I mean, it was a lot, you know. I was a weed head. You know, I share this because I think when people look at me right now, I don't wear that. And I was talking with a friend earlier and saying that a lot of times people don't know what our experiences are because we don't wear our experiences. And so I think a lot of times when we're talking to young people, it's also important that they know that we have had failures, because those failures lead to our successes. I graduated law school at 40, you know, so the fact that, you know, folks are like, I would never do that, you know. And so I think for me as a woman born in the mid-70s and here now in 2024, you know, I didn't get to see all the images of women that look like me and all the variety, shapes, and colors doing the thing they wanted to do. So you all have the benefit of seeing people that look like you doing these amazing things, traveling to amazing places. The only person I knew in my 20s who lived out of country was my mom's oldest sister, and she moved to Israel as a Hebrew Israelite. And I'm Jewish, so I got to learn about what it meant to be Black in Israel long before it was popular. Now bring us to current day, that's a whole other panel. But you know what I'm saying? So I think in terms of how do we treat Black women, we continue to be seen. We continue to see each other. We continue to celebrate each other and give each other agency in terms of all the ways we show up. I'm gonna push back just a little bit, JT, on what you said earlier about showing up in our full selves, because the reality is, as women and as Black people, we don't have that ability to always show up however we want to, okay? We are put in boxes, and so I think what going to an HBCU taught me is that my skin color, my hair texture, the way I show up looking like me, it sends certain messages. And so I have to be clear about the messages I'm sending out, and I have to be clear about the messages that are being received. I still get to decide how I choose to react, or if I choose to ignore people's impressions and say whatever. But I also know that as a lawyer, if I show up not wearing what that judge wants to see, and in Louisiana where I went to school, I had a judge who kicked me out for not wearing high heels. I don't wear high heels. So these things are still in place and impact us as women. And so I think to ignore that is a mistake, but I think to bolster us in the spaces where we can be bolstered, let's do it, but also prepare each other for the spaces that aren't as welcoming and judge us harshly.
I've been thinking this whole time about how I'm going to answer this question, and it's honestly like I don't know how to answer it, because as a Black woman living in Oregon, I feel like I haven't got the full experience of how a Black woman should truly be treated. Especially because like I have gotten, my first time traveling out of Oregon was in November of 2020, and I got to go to New York and DC. You know, they call DC Chocolate City for a reason, and like just seeing how like the Black women are treated there on a daily basis, like the men hold the door for them like all the time, whereas like living in Oregon, the white men expect you to hold the door for them more often than they would hold the door for you. So honestly, just being more supportive of Black women and allowing them to have more seats at the tables, providing them with more opportunities, inviting them in more male-dominated spaces, and because like there are so many women that I've met in Oregon who are going into like male-dominated industries, and I think it's so cool to see that women are doing these things like electrical wiring and plumbing and all that stuff that you commonly see men going into. No, there are women doing it, and some of them are Black women too. So just allowing Black women more opportunities to show that we are so much more. We are so much more than what America has shown us to be. Like seriously, Black women are so resilient, and like I don't know what I would do if I wasn't a Black woman, but like just getting to know so many different personalities, like we really carry the world on our backs with our emotions, with our thought process, with everything that we do. It's just in our nature. It literally is. So just, you know, be more open to learning about a Black woman, knowing her story. And yeah, sorry, I just got all over the place, but yeah.
No, you did.
Yeah, I think from my perspective as a man, what I've really learned over time is that so much of these conversations around liberation and freedom are rooted in this concept that we have to step into positions of leadership and we have to be the ones charging forward. I think as a man who has the privilege of working for a group of incredible, brilliant Black women that I learn from every day, something very, very central that I internalize is that in order to be a good steward of my community, I have to know how to follow. I have to know how to follow, and I have to be comfortable being a foot soldier, right? And I have to understand that the areas in which I carry privilege can be assets to the community writ large if I'm willing to say, hey, put me where you need to put me. If you need to send me into the trenches to get the dirty work done so that the higher level work can get done behind the scenes, you're the person to do that. Send me into the trenches and tell me what you need from me. So, in sum, just being willing to be disposable, not to anybody's means, but to the needs of the community, and to be willing to serve as a foot soldier, I think, as a man, is a really important part of elevating the work and the visibility and the brilliance of Black women on a day-to-day basis.
All right, my next question is this. With all the distrust in the U.S. right now and in Portland between the white and Black communities, what advice would you give to help mend it or ease it in a sort of way to help build that trust back up between communities?
Can I jump in on this one?
Go ahead.
First? Okay. I think that we have to root ourselves in power. Trust is something that should be extended in situations where parties are on equal footing. I don't think that, there's this expression, it's not freedom if somebody has to give it to you, right? we can't expect nobody to hand us our freedom over. So in order to mend and establish trust, I actually think that as a community, we need to be really intentional about building power, amassing capital in every way, shape, and form, and making sure that we collectively understand how to utilize that capital, not in traditional ways that capital has been utilized, right, which is to hoard resources, to cut people off from things, to separate some people from others, but instead to use capital as an energetic force that can energize, that can breathe life into communities, that can elevate those who have been pushed to the bottom of society and make sure that we all are able to live in lockstep with one another. I think when true equity is established, I think we have a foundation upon which trust can not only emerge, but can thrive and be sustained.
Last year, I got to do a really deep dive on the 6 steps of nonviolent social change, which were developed by Dr. Martin Luther King. And they talk about the triple evils, which are poverty, racism, and the last one is blanking my mind right now. But where I'm going with that is that I felt, me personally, I don't know if there will ever be a level of trust, especially after finding out today that Oregon has one of the highest rising rates of white supremacy right now, especially after everything that I went through in 2020 with the Black Lives Matter movement. Until we can come to an understanding of like just knowing that we are here and like Black people have fought for a long time to be in Oregon. Like I run the Black Student Alliance at my school, and I'm focusing on the Oregon Black pioneers that literally bought Oregon's Black history because no one has ever talked about it. They always talk about how like, or they talk about the KKK's history in Oregon, but they don't talk about the Black history. So until we can acknowledge that Black people fought to be here in Oregon, that we fought for our privilege to be in this state, I don't know if I can ever build trust with like, the white community as of right now.
I understand that.
I'm going to say that I didn't mean to scare you with that statistic earlier. It's just the reality, As a biracially Black woman who half of my family is white, I don't have the luxury of being able to say I don't want to deal with white folks. I am estranged from half of the white people in my family right now, and that's not an easy thing to do. But racism is exhausting, especially when it's in your family, and it's your parent, and it's your sibling, and it's your, them folks you share blood with who say they actually love you. But what I also know doing anti-racism work is that these people live in the world, and that they hold power and authority over others. And so I can't give up on them. And so in the work that we do with Race Talks, I think so often people want to go out, I'm going to join this group. I'm going to go do this thing. I'm going to help, and especially because we have so many white folks here, I'm going to join a Black organization. That's not where you're needed. As Black folks, we don't see each other enough. So we just so thankful when we in spaces. And so, unfortunately, it's like, yeah, some of y'all got interracial partners and biracial kids and you're a white mama, and it's like, we want your children, we want your partner, but we need to kind of be in space together. And unfortunately, I know that's really hard to take in, but that's also how we need white folks to show up and have some trust. So if you are a white mama to a biracially Black child, establish some relationships with some aunties and uncles who can bring your children into spaces to show them what it means to be like in Black community and not feel like you have to be there. Because unfortunately, for me as a biracially Black child who lived with the white family, I could relate a lot to Aki, and I wasn't adopted. But I was asked all the time, are you adopted? And I get real tired, especially when the person who's my white parent biologically was my dad. And most people assume it's the white mother. And so that's a whole other kind of dynamic. But the reality is anytime we tried to go into spaces that were Black for me, I was so caught up in noticing how uncomfortable they were. So that meant I never really got to figure out what it meant for me to be Black in space until I came to Portland, which was all Black, and now it's not that. So what I'm saying is, especially for white folks, one of the way we build trust with you all is you show up and hold space for us. So if you know that we as Black people are gathering, instead of saying, well, why can't I be in the space? Hey, do you need someone to stand at the door so y'all don't need to watch it all the time? Do y'all need somebody to kind of keep eyes out, because we're always on guard? Can I go talk to my racist white friends and neighbors and talk to them about how they can be less racist and how socioeconomically we are all enslaved in some way, shape, or form to capitalism? So, the reality is that we got to look at each other differently. We got to treat each other with respect, but we can't be so offended when folks say, hey, I need some space. I gotta fortify me and love on me and the people that look like me.
All right. Good. All right, and with that, we're gonna move on to the crowd. If you have any questions for us, we're happy to answer them.
See you, Mama Donna. Would you like to say it? No. So this is my mother, Donna Maxey, who's born and raised in Portland. And one of the conversations we were having earlier was there is a disconnect in respect, I think, generationally. We talk about race, but I don't think a lot of the conversation isn't focused on generational respect. And so I think she is Mama Donna because it pisses me off every time we go into spaces and people want to call her Donna. It used to piss me off as a kid when I would go in somewhere with my grandfather and his name is Charles Maxey, and everybody in the Black community referred to him as Mr. Maxey, but the white folks called him Charlie. What? Do you see all this gray hair on this man? So I think part of the challenge I deal with, pushing up on 50, and I wear that as a badge of honor, is because even though I don't look my age, and I think youthfully I feel about 33, that was a good year, I claim it. But I was, in New York City doing my thing. But anyway, but I think, the challenge is how we are not peers. I love y'all, but we are not peers. I'm old enough to be at least 3 of y'all's mama. So, so I think the challenge is when we come into spaces and we refer to each other as auntie or uncle, like that is respect to me. In other spaces I've been Mama Shaina, Dr. Shaina. I was told by a friend in community, I don't like that you're not using the doctor title. Why are you not flexing on us, I'd be making everybody in my family call me doctor. It's like, because I know you socially, I don't know you professionally, I don't know you academically. It feels weird, I don't want to be pretentious. And so this Fred said, well, why don't you inspire us in our community before you go out and inspire the other people? And that flip for me really made me think, oh, wow, okay, yeah. So if I'm asking to be respected as someone who's older, then I gotta shift and adjust as well. So I think it's a two-way street, because I think sometimes you all are looking for something a little more from us, and sometimes we don't always know what that is, because we're trying not to take up space, but we also recognize that we've been through some things. I also look at my mother, who's 75. I'm always bringing her into spaces with me, because I want to share her. She has wisdom, she has experience, and I think having intergenerational relationships, one, it keeps us youthful, but it keeps us learning, from each other, and it keeps us building that community space and love.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I think too often we relegate our elders to vessels who are meant to store information about the past. I think it's so vitally important, and we see this in our work all the time, that we involve our elders in conversations about the future. And that means that every generation, from young folks to folks who are, what do we call them, middle-aged? I don't know what I'll call them, I'm 30. Yeah, seasoned. Versus our elders, like we all need to be in conversation with one another about the futures that we're building. Because when we talk about what a community looks like, a community is not just a bunch of young people running around. It's not just a bunch of people who are, in the quote-unquote prime of their lives having kids running around. It is an intergenerational fabric that's tied together by bonds that stretch and span across the years. So making sure that every single member of our community has an active stake in shaping what the present of that community looks like, in understanding what the past of that community looks like, and most importantly, in helping mold what the future of that community is going to look like, is going to be vitally important for us if we're serious about moving forward together.
I truly believe that, because I come from a family that has continued generations of trauma, and they want me to continue it, but I'm the only one in my family that has stepped out of that generational trauma and done something about it. So it breaks my heart to see that my family has so much trauma that they can't be a part of these conversations, but I can, and I will be able to show them that we can break generational curses.
I think in order to give advice, you have to have historical context. And so we can't talk about where we are right now without understanding how we were legally set up to not be in solidarity with each other. So when we talk about going through, the passage and was it the gate of no return? Okay, so couldn't touch each other, couldn't talk to each other. We saw that, right? It was mentioned. No communication. I think if it wasn't in here, I saw something else that said they kept bamboo in between our people. Was that on here? Okay, so I've been seeing so many different films lately. I'm like, what Happy Black History Month. And so I think, you talk about being black but finding out your father's white. One drop rule. Okay, so we have to talk about historical context, the fact that we couldn't even speak to each other, the fact that, we were set up, and then now when we bring it more current, I'm not saying 2024, I'm talking about Marcus Garvey and the Back to Africa movement and how we were set up to hate each other and be in opposition to that movement, and how we were even set up once we got over to Liberia. So, and then how, having any kind of African context the name of the game in America is assimilation. So if you are not assimilating in every way, shape, and form, you are not American. So the whole point of being here in this country is to strip yourself of your identity. Now, white folks get the benefit of white privilege when they strip their cultural identities living here. What do we get? We still look like us. So if we get with someone white or lighter skin, we're told that our proximity to whiteness is then how we get to blend in and assimilate. If we act more white, if we, straighten our hair, if we do things to assimilate into the culture and be less ourselves, then we might just accept you. You might make it. You might be a benefit to your people and your race. And then that doesn't even go on to say about the missionary work, right, that is done in the continent when families are brought over as refugees and indoctrinated into American culture. Don't talk to those black folks. You don't want to be like them. Don't go over by those black folks. Now, what's crazy to me is as light as I am in the winter and feel like I blend in with the walls, I worked with an African brother from, where was he? Burkina Faso. He about 7 feet tall in your complexion, and the white folks talked about black folks as if he was not even there. But let me come in the room, and all of a sudden they panic. So it's something about the accent. White folks don't see African folks from the continent as being black. And we have been taught as each other to hate each other because we are trying to get a little iota of freedom. And what'd you say, if you had to ask for it, you ain't free? So the reality is that we are in a Renaissance movement again, right? So we've experienced several iterations of Renaissance. So Black History Month, go on and read up on the Harlem Renaissance, read up on Marcus Garvey, read up on all the ways that we have attempted to go back home and reconnect with ourselves. And so I think right now in this current generation, we're doing it through music. We're doing it through taking trips back. When I was in high school, we had a Black Studies department in my high school. We're trying to send students back to HBCUs and reconnect with our roots. So I don't think there's any easy answer. The reality is you are here in a system that isn't treating us well. And so if you're coming here thinking that it's going to treat you well too, I mean, tell me what you're doing, because, you know, we're still fighting against it. But I think what we can do is, again, go back to seeing each other. So if you come into a space and you see us and we haven't spoken, then speak. Hey, how are you doing, my sister? Hello, brother, how are you doing? That acknowledgement automatically builds that connection. If I'm not your brother, and okay, well, hey, listen, peace be unto you, you know. But if people are welcoming and receptive, then jump on that. But I think that's where it has to be. Sometimes it's not always going to be someone else initiating it. Sometimes you have to be the person to initiate, to speak to your point, brother.
I also think, just to quickly piggyback off that, you know, I had the privilege of passing through spaces that like shocked me in terms of the way that blackness was practiced in those different spaces, and which black folks from which nooks and crannies of the black diaspora all over the world showed up in disproportionate amounts. So born and raised in this neighborhood, Black American neighborhood, right? I had to do a fifth year of high school. I was a terrible high school student. I ended up going to Yale University. When I got to Yale, I went to the African American Cultural Center at Yale. I was gassed. I was like, okay, this is gonna be the place where I find all the black folks that come from neighborhoods like mine, and I'm gonna find my community in this space. Actually, in that space, and you will see this in Ivy League universities, the black folks at Ivy League universities are disproportionately, they disproportionately come from immigrant families, not Black American families. And then there was almost like this sense of elitism. Oh, you got tattoos? Like, oh, you dress a certain way, you talk a certain way. There was almost like a backlash against this Black American identity that was seen as greasy or less than, or not quite up to snuff, not quite professional enough. They reversed that. I had the privilege of going to the United Kingdom to go to graduate school. I go to the UK, somebody say, what are you? I said, I'm black. They said, well, you ain't black. What are you talking about? What are you, Algerian? Like, come on, man. So I think what I saw there is even internally within the black community, the cultural divisions don't exist as much, they exist along cultural lines, right? I'm from Ghana, you're from Ivory Coast, I'm from Nigeria, you're from this other tribe in Nigeria, we don't get along, right? There were divisions that I just had never been exposed to. I think the same thing occurs day to day in this space between the Black diaspora, the Black immigrant diaspora in America, and the Black diaspora that is a byproduct of the transatlantic slave trade. We have been sat and concentrated in a place for over 400 years where we've been forced to create a culture of our own, right? And then folks from other countries who come here, they have their culture, they have their roots, they have all the things that we were severed from. So I think there's almost a bitterness and a resentment on the Black American end, like, I kind of hate seeing that. Like, I feel like I don't have that. It's rooted in trauma and pain. And then on the other end, there's almost a fear. Oh, I'm in America now. I pray I don't become that, because look at the way they're getting treated over here. That's not like it was where I come from. So I think that the most important thing that we can do for one another is to willingly and openly learn about, expose ourselves to each other's cultures, and start to understand that there's beauty and value in that exchange.
that is exactly the same thing I was gonna say, because the last pageant that I competed in was the Miss Black International Ambassadors pageant, and it's an international pageant specifically for Black women. And I had a sister queen from Nigeria, and I had a sister queen from the UK, but she was from Nigeria as well. And like they were talking about their experiences, like they grew up, like their families were from the same part of Nigeria, but she grew up in the UK. So like their actual, like culturally they were raised the same, but like how they went and expressed their cultures were completely different based on the location, like the geographical word is my brain is like running on 5% right now. But no, yeah, I feel like the more we actually learn about the different types of Black culture, the more we can be more accepting of ourselves for one, and accepting of other people and other Black people and their cultures. Like I didn't really know much outside of the typical African cultures like Nigerian or Ethiopian. Like there's so many more to unlock. So I definitely recommend going out and doing your own deep dive, you know, go into detail, get very specific. There's so many languages out there to know, so many different types of cuisine to try. It's all about, you know, taking a step, start with yourself and educating yourself. There's so many things to be educated on.
And with that, that is the end of Black Star Homecoming Expedition. Thank you very much for coming out. I hope y'all enjoyed it.
Can we give these panelists one more round of applause?